shop just outside of Kennesaw here in North Georgia. Well, today's project is going to be the restoration of this Huntley chest of drawers. Huntley furniture had been around for years and years and years, and I think in the early 1960s they merged with the then Thomasville Chair Company and became Thomasville Furniture. It's a pretty good brand of furniture. This chest is in bad shape. It probably looks pretty good from up close, but it's in bad shape, and I'll show you. The backstory on this is a friend of mine picked it up for 20 bucks, and he was short a room. He's a furniture painter, and he brought it home. He realized how bad it was, and he only knows one person stupid enough to go get it from him, and that's me. So he gave me a call. I went and looked at it, and obviously, if it wasn't for the the mid-century post-war design of the hardware, it really wouldn't be anything if it had regular pulls on it or whatever. It would just be a chest of drawers. But it does have a mid-century modern feel to it, and I looked at it and I couldn't believe all the things that were wrong with it, and I almost left it behind, but I eventually wound up picking it up for him for what he paid for it, and I'm going to restore it. If I ever wind up committed to an insane asylum, you'll probably find out that this was Petitioner's Exhibit 1. There's nobody in their right mind that would have tackled what we're going to wind up doing on this restoration for what I'm going to be able to sell this for. This is probably a $200 to $250 piece when it's done. I've already got 20 bucks into it, so there's $230 to restore this. But like I've said a couple of times before, sometimes it's more than money. It's kind of a labor of love, and I don't want to be the guy that lets a probably late 1940s, early 1950s piece of American-made furniture go to the dump because I just didn't want to fix it. So I'll give it my best, and we'll get it done. You may have also noticed that we had a bit of a brush up and rearranging in the shop. It was long overdue. It was precipitated by Black Beauty, my old compressor. Blew up about a month ago. She threw one of her motor bearings grenaded and just welded the commutator shaft, and there was no fixing it. And that compressor was probably nearly 20 years old. I bought that in the 1990s, and I used it to death, and I got my money's worth out of it. So right now I'm running on a spare compressor, which is just a small 15-gallon. So I've got to get a big one in here, and to make some room, I rearranged the shop. And as we work through, you'll see some changes, and maybe we'll do a shop tour sometime. Speaking of shop tours, as you know, my channel is not monetized, and I'm not sponsored by anybody. And we're up over 450 subscribers, and I just think that's wonderful. So thank each and every one of you for that. It just does my heart good to know that somebody wants to listen to a fat old guy who fixes furniture someplace in Georgia and listen to me ramble, so I appreciate it. All right, let me bring it in, and I will show you what we're dealing with here. Okay, I was just looking through the camera, and it still probably looks good to you. Let's take a look at this top drawer. Uh-oh. Something's missing. Well, here's the rest of it. One drawer's got to be glued back together. Let's take a look at the second drawer. Whoops. Hey, the third drawer's in one piece. Congratulations. Let's look at the fourth drawer. Oh, it's got to be re-glued. You can see it's popped out. And we have to reattach. You can see here we have to reattach the drawer guide. And the drawer guides loose on this one as well. Okay, so there's some construction right off the bat. Let's take a look at the finish. We'll take a look at the finish here. From a distance, it looks pretty good. But what it is, this is that polyurethane with a stain in it. I think they call it poly shades or something like that. And it was put on right over the old finish. And it's coming off in sheets, as you can see here. It's flaking right off. Look at this. Somebody basically just grabbed a can of that stuff and splooged it all over here. I'm not sure if you can see the runs here along the front, but they're all over the piece. The entire thing is just horribly finished and needs to be redone. So we're looking at a full strip job. We're looking at construction issues on the drawers. We've got a piece of loose molding in the front that's got to be secured. We have a number of veneer repairs that have to be done. And, you know, obviously you can see, I guess the solution for broken and chipped veneer is just to slather it with poly shades and hope it goes away. So all of these veneer chips have to be patched. And give me a second, I want to flip this thing up on its back and I'll show you one other thing. And she's on her back. But I tell you what, even without the drawers in it, this piece is heavy. What do you think of that finish job, huh? Is that a thing of beauty or what? Look at that. Very, very nice. I'll be looking at the leg assemblies. The front leg assembly looks pretty good. Look at the back leg assembly. You know what that is, right? Gorilla Glue. No good can come from that. Let's take a look inside. Looks like we've got broken dowels in there. And, oh my. Look at this. Look at this fix. Look at this shatter. Oh boy. This is not going to be pretty. Alright, well, let's look at the other piece. Come over to the other side, we see evidence of Gorilla Glue, and the leg is loose, and someone drove a nail in it, and it's blown out here, right where the dowel goes through. So I guess we'll start by doing the repairs.
this is the, I guess we're calling it the vertical stretcher for the leg frame assembly on the right side. And you can see that this has been just blown apart when the, I would guess probably someone tried to slide it when the legs were loose. And it was all put together with Gorilla Glue. So I used some heat to get the Gorilla Glue off, or to get the rear leg off, so that I could drill out the broken dowels. And I realized that there's just no way I can fix this thing correctly while it was still on the furniture. So using heat and unscrewing these glue blocks here, this one was already loose, and then the glue block here, and then I worked it very, very carefully without heat and pulled it straight down, and I was able to get that right off of there. So now we have the ability to work on this piece on the bench, and we'll have to get those broken dowels out of there, and we're going to have to set up a gluing plan so that once we put the new dowels in, we've got enough epoxy in there, and we can compress it so that we get the strength back. This side's in good shape, and the other side is similarly as bad. So let's get this up onto the bench and see what we can do. Yeah, this is what we're up against. These two dowels, minus all that glue, need to go into there. These two dowel pins need to be drilled out and cleaned. All this glue's got to come off. So I'm going to turn you off while I get this glue off. I'll bring you back when I drill out the dowels. And here's the first piece. We got it all scraped off. Basically, I just put it in the vise, and then I used a razor blade, like a cabinet scraper, to take it off. Working on this piece here, this entire side on the left side is blown out. So if I had just taken and scraped this with that side blown out, it is shattered. So what I did is I just put a clamp on it with the long side of the clamp against the damage. It holds everything together and allows me to scrape and have the wood stay still where it needs to be. So I'll continue with this, and then we'll move forward. And as I was working on this shattered piece, I had lots of micro cracks emanating out of these dowel holes, and they needed to get pulled together. So what I did is I just dripped thin super glue into these cracks, and they were pulled down by a capillary action, and I had it in the vise again, and then I crunched it in the vise to pull everything together and hit it with some instant activator, and it came out very, very well. And now if we take the leg with the dowels, you can see we got a nice tight fit again, and this is all flat. So I think what I'm going to do, rather than epoxy this back together, since we've got such a nice fit here, is just use yellow glue and assemble it that way. I think that'll be fine. But you can see just how nice that worked. Super glue is a great option when you use it correctly. Particularly the thin stuff, it just wicks right into these small cracks and does a great job for you. Okay, I'm just continuing with these dowel removals, and as I started to shave this dowel with the chisel, I noticed it was loose, but I couldn't pull it out. So what I did is I took my center punch and I punched a hole in it, and then I took a screw and a screwdriver and I screwed a screw in just about 3 or 4 turns. And now if I put my pliers right there and then tap them underneath with a hammer, look at that. How easy is that? Beats drilling it out. Just another trick to put in your arsenal. Good morning. It's the next day. Welcome back. I apologize that the final part of the glue up on the underside of the chest of drawers was lost because the battery went dead. I'll show you how we did. This morning we've got about 30 clamps to take off and rehang, and then strip the hardware and start to strip the finish. Let me show you what we finished up with yesterday. And here's our final glue up and clamp up on the underside of the chest, where we redid pretty much the entire leg assembly, and it came out really well. If you remember what it looked like, with broken dowels and Gorilla Glue all over it. And then last night before I turned in, I did a little bit of work on this molding here. The molding actually has a protrusion on the bottom of it that sets into a groove. It's kind of like a tongue and groove setup. This had come loose. I was able to pull this off with my fingers, and then I cleaned it and re-glued it. And then on the other side, I was only able to get up about the bottom, I don't know, 1.5 feet. So I cleaned and re-glued that, and that's all taken care of. So the next step for me is to pull all these clamps off and get them rehung, and then we'll strip the hardware off the drawers and prepare ourselves for strip and finish. When I redid the moldings had shrunk, and to get a tight joint at the top of the molding, we had a bit of a gap at the bottom. So last night before I turned in, I cut a small piece of mahogany on the bandsaw, and we glued that into this miter area to fill it in. So I used my Japanese pull saw here to cut off the excess. And then I'll take a chisel and chisel this flush, and that'll be our new miter. And there's that piece of wood that's been filled in, and obviously when we refinish it, we'll sand it, fill up any spots that need to be filled, but that takes probably close to a 1/4 inch gap, and gives us something to work with. Okay, let's move on to stripping the hardware. And we're down to our last drawer to be stripped. You can see the difference in the color. One of the real challenges here has been, because of the poor refinishing job that was done earlier, has been to get these off the inside lips, these big zips. And what I've been doing is putting a little stripper on to soften them up, and then using a razor blade as a scraper. The sides are a little bit more difficult because I can't go like this. I mean, I can, but it's going to tear the grain up a little bit. So what I have to do is kind of be careful and try to work my way with the grain. Over here it's a little bit easier because I can scrape lengthwise. But we got one more draw to do, and then we've got the case. 3.5 hours to strip this entire piece. That includes the drawers which are inside, and the vast majority of it was dig and finish out of these crevices and moldings and things. Anyways, we got one other thing I want to address before we bring it inside and start to sand, and that's this stain here. I don't know if it's a water stain or if it's ink, but we're going to use some oxalic acid on that. As you know, oxalic is a powder, crystal form. It's sold as wood bleach. I mix it up in warm hot water, and I put as much oxalic in as the solution will take. And looks like we can put a little bit more in here. And like I've always said, you can buy this at Home Depot and Lowe's. They sell it as wood bleach. I buy mine on Amazon. It's much cheaper when you buy it as oxalic acid. And then it just goes on, and it's one of those things, again, as I say 1,000 times, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you've got to do the entire surface so you don't have a light spot. Alright, we just lay this on here, and when it dries, we hope it lightens it up. I'll bring you back. Okay, we've got some sanding done. You can see that repair from yesterday. That had been, remember, that was all blown out. That looks pretty good. And on the other side, same deal. Got a little bit of fill here. There was a nail hole and it's still wet. Up top, same deal, nail hole. And we're getting ready to do the veneer repairs, but as I was sanding the side here, I noticed this long indentation, this long scrape. It's actually like a bruise where the veneer is pushed in. So we're going to try to steam that out. You know how we do that. We use my steam iron from the Goodwill, a clean, damp rag, and we try to push the steam into the dent and bring it back up to the surface. A little bit more difficult doing this on its side than it is when it's flat. It's easier to see what you're doing when it's flat. Yeah, that's brought that right up. It's a little bit low here. We'll put a little extra time here, but that worked out well. And that was one of those little bits of damage that really would have shown up when you put the finish on. Okay, I'm happy with that. for today. We'll bring you back tomorrow. We'll get this finished up and out of here.
A viewer named Michael had emailed me or left a comment and asked me to do a little bit of explaining about the different types of lacquer that I use. I use Mohawk's system. I'm not sponsored by Mohawk. I'm not a shill for Mohawk. The reason I use them is because I have a Mohawk dealer about 20 miles from my house, and that allows me to get their products when I need them. I basically use two different types of lacquer, two lacquer products. The first one is a sealer, and what that does is you spray it on and it seals the wood and it raises the grain and it allows you to sand it smooth. It's got a lot of solids in it. It's designed to sand easily. It powders right up, fills in minor imperfections, and with a couple of coats of that with a light sanding, normally I'll sand first with 220 and then with either 400 or with some steel wool. You get a nice smooth base to apply your lacquer. If you look at the restoration of the Nichols and Stone rocking chair, I show that pretty clearly. And then I use just a regular lacquer product as a top coat, usually 2 or 3 coats depending on the piece. Coloring has confused a number of people because I often use glazes between top coat layers. Glazes are a thick oil-based stain product that are designed to go between top coat layers. Right now this piece is raw wood. If I put stain on it, it will stain the wood, but I'll have absolutely no control over how that stain goes on. I might have an area that stays sealed that'll be very light, another place might be very dark, and then you've got to do all sorts of color adjusting. So very often what I'll do is seal it, which is basically, let's just say we're going to cover this entire piece in a sheet of glass. And it's going to look very much like it does now. But then I'll be able to put colors on that glass, and another piece of glass, and colors on that glass, and another piece of glass. Obviously the glass is a coat of lacquer or a coat of sealer, and that's how I'll build the finish. And if you were to strip off the finish, what would be left would be the piece in its natural state, rather than putting the color into the wood as you would with a wiping stain or a dye. So that's kind of the system. Maybe someday I'll shoot a video with more of the little details of the lacquer systems that I use and how I color. But for this piece, what I'm going to do is seal it. I'll put 2 coats of sealer on it and I'll sand it, and then I'm going to glaze it with a Van Dyke brown glaze, and then I'm going to seal the glaze in, and then I'm going to go over top of it with color coats, and if I need to darken it or adjust the color, then I'll shoot a toner on it. A toner is basically a liquid spray that I make out of lacquer thinner, dye stain, and a little bit of lacquer so it bites, and that allows me to shoot a color coat on, spray a color coat on. It's translucent, you can see through it, but it allows me to adjust the color to where I want it. I want this to come out in kind of a medium brown walnut. That's what my wife wants this piece to be. And you can see we've got quite a long ways to go. Lots of times when I have a long ways to go, I will use a wiping stain. I'll sometimes dilute it so I get closer. I don't have to make it quite as dark with later coats of color. But this piece had so much finish on it that I think there are parts of it that are still probably pretty well sealed, and I don't think that wiping stain is going to absorb as evenly as I would want. So that's what I'm going to do to color this. I'm not going to show you every step because there's other places on my channel you can see that I've shot hours and hours of me spraying color and spraying lacquer. I don't need to put that in this video. The one thing to keep in mind is it's a rainy day in Georgia today, and anytime you shoot lacquer-based products in a humid environment, you run the risk of what's called blush. That's when the lacquer hardens before the moisture in the air gets out and it clouds the finish. So we put in what we call a lacquer retarder, which basically is a chemical that just slows the curing time of the lacquer a little bit, so the lacquer kind of can cure underneath and drive the water vapor out rather than seal over top of it and cloud your finish. So that's what I'm going to do. I will bring you back for final views and final takes when we're all done. But Michael, I hope that helped a little bit, and you'll see the final product when I'm done.
I know I just got done saying I wasn't going to do this, but I think this is a good opportunity for a teaching moment. So anyway, here's the glaze I use. It's just been stirred because pigments will settle out of it. It's a thick pigmented substance, so it's just been stirred. It's in Van Dyke Brown. This drawer front has been sprayed with sealer, and then I sanded it with 320 so it's nice and smooth. I take the glaze and I apply it right over top of the dried sealer. And you can see how it's already starting to color the drawer. But the one thing that you'll notice is that the color is absolutely uniform because the glaze is laying on top of the sealer. It's not getting pulled into the wood differentially. It's sitting right on top of the sealer, and however thick I put this on is the color I'm going to get. Now I'm going to get a little bit fancy on you here. If you can see, there's an inlay in this in this drawer, and I think what I'm going to do is try to highlight that just a little bit by wiping a little bit of the glaze off of that inlay. And this is, again, is something that you couldn't do with a wiping stain. It would just get sucked in and then you're stuck with it. You don't have to be ridiculously precise here because you're going to brush this out, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now, each brand of glaze is going to be a little bit different as far as how thick you can put it on in one coat and not have either dry time problems or adhesion problems down the road. Now, next step. This is a chip brush and it's dry. And what I'm going to do is just very carefully brush out the glaze, kind of smoothing it out with the grain, and the brush marks help accentuate your grain pattern a little bit. And there, for a first coat, that's nice. Now what I'm going to do here is, with the brush cleaned off, just lightly, and what you can see that I'm doing here is I'm wiping the brush on my clean rag, and I'm feathering in any glaze that may have built up. Now I hope you can see that, but we've got that's toned way down. Let me pull up another one. This piece hasn't been glazed, and I hope the camera will pick up the difference in color. But we've got the first coat of color is on, and we were able to highlight that inlay, and we're working down towards our final color. Now I'll seal that in about, it's going to take about 2 hours today for this to dry. Mohawk glazes take longer to dry than some others. Assessive will dry almost instantly, and that's one of the drawbacks of Mohawk glazes, in my opinion. But there you go, that's how we glaze, and then in this case highlight this design feature, and I hope that helps. Well, she's finally done. Here's what we did to finish it. This morning you saw me seal it and glaze it. After the glaze dried, I shot a coat of sealer over it and a coat of lacquer, and then I shot a coat of toner over it to richen the color up, and then 3 additional coats of lacquer. It has been a rainy day and extremely humid here in Georgia. It was very, very difficult to apply lacquer today. I probably should have waited, but I just have too much to do to wait, and I used a lot of retarder and a lot of no blush, which is basically a spray you can buy from Mohawk. Let me see if I can get you in focus here. And it's basically a chemical that temporarily melts the lacquer finish and lets the blush out, and then it seals it back up. It's really, really handy. So pretty much every time I shot lacquer, I had blush and had to take care of it. But there you go. As you remember, it was finished with a horribly splooged on coat of polyshades. All the drawers were broken. The legs were broken. Everything works. So listen, from our shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia, best regards, thanks for watching, take good care, and we'll see you next video. Bye.